Hello, my name is Mihaela Ciucurel. I'm from Romania, University of Pitești. I'm a psychologist and also I am a psychotherapist and integrative approach. Um, I feel very happy to find me here in this morning, and I hope that you enjoy our presentation. The title is Social Integration of Persons with Learning Disabilities through Education and Training. The presentation contains the following main topics. An introduction, a very short introduction. After that, methodological changes for education and training in adults with LD. And finally, some conclusion and some future discussion. And also the direction. In introduction, I consider that it's very important a short history of the learning disability concept, some discussion about terminology, definition and controversies of the concept of learning disabilities, some data about epidemiology of learning disabilities, and I choose to find the data of epidemiology about the general population, about the children, and about the adults. And finally, some information about models of social inclusion for people with learning disabilities. At a short history of the LD concept, I find some studies who analyzed categorization, is correct? The categorization of the concept, because from a historical point of view, the people with learning disabilities being called different have been called in different manners, like subhuman organism, mass, unspeakable object of dread, wholly innocent, object of ridicule, and even eternal child. Other author, it's about Atherton, said that LD concept and LD and adults have been correlated with witchcraft, lunacy, mental illness, and even with the criminality. This categorization of the LD still, until the introduction of the concept of community care, and most important, the principle of normalization. Finally, the concept of LD has been proposed since the second half of the last century as a reaction to the school educational reforms, and also with the aim of differentiating the children with low educational outcomes, or especially with school failure. As a terminology and definition, in the literature, LD are generally considered as a rare disorder, also with an organic termination that affects in negative way the student's ability to learning, reading, and writing, and also with is correlated with school failure. Another study said that LD is a disorder that have in common an important impairment in major nervous system function as listening, speaking, reading and writing, reasoning, or even in mathematical abilities. Concerning the how each describe LD, most definitions describe LD in children, in educational context, and less adults in the variety of work or personal life settings. It's about a study about Lowry. Historical point of view, just a few definitions of learning disability have included reference to adults. And for this reason, the most authors that I find it extrapolated the concept from childhood to the adult stage, and considering that individuals with learning disabilities have lifelong difficulty learning, because of some difference in processing information. This syntagma processing information is present at the most authors because it seems to be that the learning disabilities is in strongly correlation with another particular settings of the processing of information. Concerning the epidemiology, um, in lifetime, in the historical point of view, the prevalence of LD is important for three sections of the community. It's about national education, national health, and welfare system. It's the two part of the society who are very interesting about the prevalence of LD. I find an example about the prevalence of LD in children in the US. The study shows that in US children with LD represent 9.5%, and also this condition of LD in children affect as comorbidity, especially the children with special health care needs. From my perspective, is not a real LD to these children because their special condition is about children with terminal disease or children with special medical care needs. It's not a real situation of children with learning disabilities. It's a particular one, but study shows. I find another study. It's who speak about the prevalence of the LD in public school students, and the authors says that represent 5% for all public schools, and the presence of LD to the children in school are often associated with social skills deficit, with emotional disorder, or with behavioral disorders. In adult stage, the most study says that LD in adult stage are coexisting with psychiatric disorders, but they don't mention what kind of psychiatric disorders. We don't know. It's about I don't know. Sorry, bipolar disorders or maniacal disorders or just depressive disorders or obsessive compulsive disorders or what kind of disorders are mentioned, that just psychiatric disorders. Other studies mention the challenging behavior, other study with autistic traits, and I find another study who correlated LD in adult stage with personality disorders. Concerning the prevalence in general population in Western world, I find a study who reported prevalence of 1 to 2.5% in general populations. It's about we're talking about the person with having major functional impairment, and also this person requiring a lifelong need for support and intervention. About the models of social inclusion for people with LD, we're talking about adults with LD, and if we read the official documents of the governments, we realize that social inclusion for adults with LD is a noble goal of policymakers. In all the official documents, we can find these references. In reality, the people with LD, adults with LD especially, face poor life chances due to discrimination. I like very much a model. His name is the ecological model for social inclusion for people with LD. I chose them because it's one of the most used model for the adults and for the people with LD. And I like it because it's based on two very important and emerging themes. It's about interpersonal relations and it's about community participation. There are two point key who help us to build on real social inclusion for people with LD. Also, I find the studies who consider that social inclusion has been interchangeable with independent living. I'm not so brave to consider that social integration of people, of persons with LD, to have an important goal like independent living. I'd be happy to obtain for this person social inclusion because I think that independent living for adults with LD it's a target very hard to touch. The second part of presentation contains the data about the methodological changes for education and training in adults with LD, some principle of education, some data about the education and training approach, some information about pedagogical strategy, and social perspective on education and training. The principle of education is based on the principle of putting the person with LD at the center of education planning rather than applying an ideological frameworks in action. It's loss of time that find general ideological frameworks in action and to go. It's very important to put the person in the center of educational planning. Also, any educational training approaches of this person involve 4 key steps for each of them, not for general, not for a group of adults with learning disabilities. For each person, we have go to the successive 4 key steps. The first is the diagnostic. It's about subject evaluation. The second one is selection and to design an intervention plan for this person. After that, implementation of the plan, and also the 4 steps is evaluation and intervention outcomes. Concerning the evaluation, it's very important to assess for the adults with LD their needs, their interests, their preferences, because it represents a good point to start. It's important to assess their academic skills and also to identify the weaknesses and strengths in terms of his learning experience. His learning experience is not my perspective of his learning experience. Is his learning experience how is described by the person with LD. It's not my perspectives, is their perspectives. Also, for evaluators who make this assessing, it's very important for theoretical point of view to define the learning difficulties, because to define the learning difficulties is a good way to understanding the problem. It's it's important to clarify. So, thank you. To clarify the concept, because if to define the concept, to extract the main features. On the other hand, for clinical point of view, we must investigate and diagnose the issue of learning disabilities on adults. Also, it's very important for clinical point of view to develop practical solution for these people. About the diagnosis, the most important model is the multidimensional model, because it's the best diagnostic for adults with LD. This multidimensional model of diagnostic focus on multidimensional and differential assessment. The model is not focused to description of deficits, what don't do that. It include the subject's representation, their resources, interactive in various contexts, and also include the impact of learning disabilities on the construction of their identity. We speak about the adults with which have also an identity, a very strong identity. Even their identity contains the data about the learning disabilities and define them like a person with the learning disabilities. Also, the multidimensional model of diagnosis focus on contextualization of the problem, integrate many components of their lives like social, emotional, cognitive, and developmental components, and also takes into the consideration the experience of the subjects. Also, in the diagnosis, on the first step of the process, on the diagnosis, it's very useful to use the occupational therapy models. I like these models because they're very useful when we propose to assessment of performances in activities of daily living of people with learning disabilities. But the models of occupational therapy can also assess different areas of living like motivation expectations, also the daily pattern of self-care, the performance in the domain like leisure and productivity, not only the school or academic performances. Also offers the possibility to identify the sensory profile and also to evaluate the impact of the environment on functional abilities. All this information are very important when we assess a person with learning disabilities. Also, I find a reference to a social network mapping are considered that very useful because it's a tool for sociological perspectives on adults with LD. After the diagnosis, the second step is to design an evaluation on intervention program. It's about pedagogical strategies are coherent and adaptive to the person, imply general action to overcome the subject's difficulties of communication or and understanding. Also, the pedagogical strategy must use the assistive technology and overcome the barriers of adults with LD. Also, the pedagogical strategy are strongly correlated with a good instructor-learner interaction pattern, and we can find some important details to the study of Merrill and Skinner, and also our focus on creating a flexible, adaptive behavior of teacher to the level of subject's understanding, and to use the direct and explicit instruction during the implementation of the educational program. We work and with development of personalized and accompanied pedagogy, which is characterized by stimulate the engagement of the adult learners, involve the adult learners as full partner in educational process rather than to treat them like a children, seems to treat the adult with learning disabilities like a children in school is the most frequent error that we find on professionals. About I talking about the context of the Romanian interaction between adults with disabilities and teachers. Also, this kind of pedagogy is based on autonomy. It's about autonomy of learning disabilities person, but also it's about the autonomy of teacher, because it's very important to base the relation on autonomy of the both sides. And finally, this kind of pedagogy overcome the traditional model of instruction with all its dimensions. It's about architecture of pedagogy, pedagogical relationship, and it's about responsibility, and also it's about the tool that they use. In this slide, we can find some information about how to organize training groups for the adults with learning disabilities. I find in a study with Lesha, 2004. Sorry, 2004. Also, in this kind of pedagogical strategy, many studies recommended that to use modern information and communication technology, and for the people with learning disability, it has been proposed a lot of these technological paths, like intuitive interfaces, like multimedia modularization, like virtual simulation, like adapted tutorials, like social networks of accompaniment and support. The final step is assessment of learning outcomes. At the final of the process, it's a paradox because this process haven't a final. It's a continuing work during the entire life of the person with disabilities, because the new context of the life determine on this person new needs of learning, and we can hope to generalize a model, but this model can generalize in all the context of his life, present in the future. The assessment is the last step. Involve difficulties because of interpretation of evaluation subjects due to the complexity of the situation. Sometimes we propose an initial aims, and finally to the evaluation discovered that we don't we didn't reach the initial aims, but we reached something more important, because the relation between educators and person with learning, adults with learning disabilities is very complex, is very dynamic, and it require a permanent and adaptive manner to view the problem. Also, all the studies says that a reply intervention is required as an adjusted form under the condition of reconsidering the negative elements in the idea of softening of the identified disturbing factors. Sometimes, in the moment to start, we can identify all the disturbing factors that confront the people with learning disabilities. Also, under evaluation, we must know that the positive acquisition will allow the trainees to rebuild a social image that is very important, and also to acquire a new certainty about their skills. We can hope that a new rebuild social image and the new skills is transposable from the training group to the other social organization, because in all the evaluation about after the training groups, we found that this person with learning disabilities um, have very important acquisition, but at the follow-up evaluation, 3 months or 6 months or 1 year after the training group, we discovered that the new building, the new image, new social image, or new skills aren't present. And the problem is where disappear. It's not disappearing. It's just my colleague said that it's embedded competencies. It's okay. The concept embedded encapsulation. Embedded. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Also, for the adults with learning disabilities, required research and programming in environments outside of school and outside of work. It's required supportive assistance to improve social related skills with this situation. And it's required to combining the knowledge and experience from the recreation and leisure field with that from the ND field. It's very important because in recreation and leisure field, the adults with learning disabilities are perfect. They have a very good image, they have a very good self-esteem, and only if put them in the context of work or the context of school, they have learning disabilities. Conclusion and future direction. The most important for the people or adults with learning disabilities is promoting social inclusion, because it's very important to creating a social capital and to creating communities despite disabilities. Today, LD adults are becoming better known and framed, but often continue to go underdiagnosed and untreated due to circumstantial factors. In Romania, the adults with learning disabilities are very rare person, because the setup of the educators are to consider that person as lazy, as not enough motivated, are with a very slow interest for the school because of the media models and because of the characteristic feature of our society. I'm confronting with the situation where the parents bring her child to a psychologist because they have their child have school failure. They consider their child like a person without motivation, and sometimes the parents don't understand that this child have a learning disabilities. They ask me if it's about intellectual disabilities. I answer no, and when find the answer that the answer is no, becomes very happy and ignore that is not intellectual disability, but is a learning disability. It's a disability. having an intellectual disabilities. And sometimes put the children in the situation in put the children in the situation they're in needs um, help and support. Um, the second idea, the second conclusion is that the majority of people with learning disability lives in the complex system of social support during their entire life cycle. It's very important to build a social system support for this person, because the learning disability is present during the entire life cycle. The third idea is that the approach learning disability on adult and on children is require collaborative working practices in order to maintain and in order to improve through education and training program the person's competencies. And finally, um, as a permanent goal for education and training strategies, adults with learning disabilities should be able to use mainstream services and to be fully integrated in the life of the community as citizens, as real citizens. This is some of the bibliography of this presentation. I hope that you can find useful. And finally, thank you for your attention. And
thank you very much. Mihaela, thank you very much.
oh, please.
Please give me a chance to ask you. Manuela, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I have two questions. The first one, I'm also teaching at an university, and I would like to know which department or institute is researching in this field. The background of my question is that schools in Germany and Austria are transferring to be an inclusive school, and teachers are telling always that we are not well trained, we don't know how to implement this inclusive education, give us models, give us more support and so. And so far I know the pedagogical institutions in Austria, they started to implement such lessons on inclusive education. But would be nice to know, is it a main point of research at your institution, or who is caring at the university about these objectives? And another question, university students are adults, always. And what are your lecturers, what models are they applying or approaches to involve students with learning disabilities in the activities or in the learning process at your university? Are there some regulations implemented already in the law, university law? Or what practical advices can you give me?
I ask the help for the Jita to understand better your question. At the first question, in my university we have two departments who teach and who develop the research studies. It's the Department of Psychology and the Department Department of Occupational Therapy. We have two departments who collaborate. It's a very good collaboration between them. In other universities in Romania, we have also the Department of Special Psychopedagogy and also Department of Social Assistance. Yes, yes, yes. The four types of department focus on the research on adults with learning and people with disabilities. Concerning the students, in university we have adults with disabilities as a students. Um, it's uh, it's difficult to teach them, and it's difficult because of the rules of the university. They try to learn, but the evaluation and the final must respect the general rule of the evaluation in an academic environment. So for this person, they succeed to obtain the bachelor, for example, in some program of our university, but it takes more longer. It takes longer to obtain the bachelor. We have the also we have a cup a couple. We build couple between the adults, students with learning disabilities, and performance students, and also a couple with a teacher. And in this kind of model, the evolution of the adults, students with learning disabilities is very good. And also, yeah. And but it takes more time. It takes more time, like compared to a student without learning disabilities for a regular student. And also, all the programs in the domain that I mentioned, like psychology, occupational therapy, social assistance, and other university psychopedagogical, special psychopedagogical benefits from the very strong very strong practice. We have practice in hospital, we have practice in schools, we have a lot of hour of practice, not so much as our colleague. I talked with my colleague yesterday, like Cyprus, for example, it's about 1,000 hours for the bachelor. We haven't so many hours, but the hours are very important for the develop the competencies in that domain.
And if I am allowed, I would like to add that in Romania there is a focus, there is a target on inclusive education, and this is in a way compulsory because it is stipulated within the law of education. So we are doing efforts in the new one issued in 2011, Law of Education number 1. We are doing efforts in order to this practice of inclusive education to become status quo in all our schools. But a reality, yes, but it takes time, and I think that we have taken already important forward steps. We have not finished the job. There are still things to be done, but anyway, we are taking seriously this challenge, and we will have mass inclusive education. Thank you.
The problem in Romania is not about the we have a very good law because referring to the inclusive education, the law is very good, but we have also the professionals very good. But the problem is to
The problem is how to combine professionals and schools and the situation in schools.
this kind of inclusive efforts, inclusive education, is not that easy because at least our educational system is a very centralized one and based in a common national curricula, common regulations for how many hours per week, how many teaching hours, how many practice hours, everything is regulated from the top. So to find, not very flexible, and to find your way in such a very strong regulated system is not an easy task. In fact, we are now experimenting how to make more flexible the educational system and to create room for such activities that are very important. And Manuela is very modest, avoiding to say that another very important thing is missing in Romania, the resources. We are very, how to say, very proud to be volunteers permanently for everything we do.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear resources being brought up. I think that could be echoed in every European country. I want to say thanks again to Manuela. Thank you very much. You did a great job. And you did a lot more than 15 minutes. Well done. That was awesome. It was particularly nice for me to hear words like inclusion and integration being at the forefront of everything that Manuela has spoken about this morning with regards to Romania. Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask? Thanks, Molly.
I think if you want to reach a good conclusion, then I think it's a way of teachers working together. Do you have any experiences in professional learning communities? Or networks of teachers working together, discussing about challenges, exchanging good practices and things like that?
Regarding our involvement in different professional networks, I may say that at least this university from which we all come is a university that is very well and strong related with a lot of professional networks. For example, we are hosting one of the most important international conferences in psychopedagogy around the world, is Edu World, and we are members of Balkanic Union of Pedagogy, European Union of University Association, Adult Learning Community, etc., etc. So we are connected. It's not a problem. I may say that for us is not is not the visibility in international hemisphere and our contacts and our relation with other important universities and research centers is not a problem for us. The problem is the same always. How to come back to the field and to implement what you learn or what you achieve from your correspondence and from your collaboration with other universities. That's a major issue, in fact.
I absolutely agree, but I was more talking about is there any space left for teachers being in such a professional learning community within a school? That was really my question.
Depend of the level of the teacher. If we speak about the teacher in a primary, secondary or regular school, not too much space for this, to be honest, not too much space, because as I told you, they are strictly regulated by the centralized system of education that impose a certain number of teaching hours per week, a certain number of practical activities with children, extra hours after school, so they have a very full, busy day, busy working day. But I want to emphasize that together with us, with the university, teachers from all the region, they can be involved in different international or professional experience with teachers from other countries in Europe. We are the ones securing the platform of cooperation, and we've done our best always to invite and to put teachers from the system to work with us in different projects and to work directly to produce the outcomes, to be members of the teams. This is why I think that we have a good impact in the region. Okay, not enough due to the dimension and to the large diversity of professors in the region. We have only around Pitești 1,100 communities that have at least one school. So you may imagine the volume that should be fulfill. But in the same time, we are the one hosting the regular meetings of the teachers in the university. We invite them to present their work, to have regular professional branch meetings. Professors of Romanian literature will meet twice a year in the Faculty of Letters. It's another example of cooperation with this extra environment.
Any other questions? Okay. That's been great. It's 10 to 11, so we'll have a coffee break in about 10 minutes. Okay. What I would like to talk about then, just briefly, is the word adults has been mentioned quite a lot, and as Georgetta and Dimitru have mentioned already, a lot of robust discussion took place when we sat together in Meath all those months and months and months ago, work packages ago. One of the things we discussed was what would constitute an adult. We wanted some kind of commonality, we wanted some kind of common structure and foundation upon which to build ALTO as a project and build our deliverables and build our results that Georgetta mentioned to you. We all know that the legal age is 18 and it's 21 and it's all of these things, but for the purposes of the ALDO project, we decided that we would regard an adult as being anybody who had completed or who had passed the age of formal education. So in Ireland, for example, at 16 years old, there's no legal compulsion on parents or on the state with regards to education a person. So that's our start point. We started at the end of formal education, and then we discussed, once we had decided on that, we discussed what we would define as a disability or as a difficulty. Both words are mentioned in our proposal. It's adults with a learning disability or adults with a learning difficulty. So one of the first things we had to do as a consortium was agree a common vocabulary, a common set of words that we would use to describe what we were trying to achieve or what we were trying to accomplish. And if we all had the same vocabulary and all the same understanding, then we could all move together in the same direction rather than different cultural and, as Dimitru mentioned earlier, opinions, I guess, which would be informed by our social backgrounds, by our upbringings, by our national identities. So what we did was we decided we would write just a little document based on explaining what we were going to call a learning disability and a learning difficulty. What we decided was that a difficulty would be an obstacle and that a disability would be something that incapacitated. So therefore, with that in mind on the board, a significant learning difficulty would be any learning or emotional problem that affects or substantially affects a person's ability to learn, get along with others, and follow convention. So that would be a learning difficulty as opposed to a learning disability, which is a significant lifelong condition that can start before adulthood, or one that is a result of a traumatic life event which affects development and leads to help being required to understand information, learn skills, cope independently. You could have a spectacularly long list there, I guess. So what we tried to do is we tried to just mention some of the groups included for the purpose of the definition and then include some extra considerations. I'm not going to go through them all, but suffice it to say that was an interesting long discussion because everybody wanted their national viewpoint, their national opinion stated, mentioned and regarded as being important. So I suppose that combined with everything you've heard this morning will let you know, will inform you as to what has gone into just creating an understanding between the partners upon which we could move forward and try to create a project. And then to have somebody like Manuela, who works in a very challenging environment, I think, and is trying, as you can tell from her discussion earlier, is trying to get to the crux of the issue, to get to the nub of an issue so that she can be more effective when it comes to delivering a clear diagnosis or a clear pathway to support with a view to including what have been to date marginalised young people and young adults and adults in general, and they've had a difficult time trying to find their place in the world. You have the likes of Manuela and our other speakers who are represented here today at the cutting edge of research, at the cutting edge of delivery to try and help these guys. I think it's very encouraging, and it shows that the work that we've put in over the last 2 years isn't going to be wasted. I think it's going to be used. So on that note, we'll break for a cup of coffee, I think. Oh, Tim just typed it all up. That's awesome. I'm just going to read it. Coffee and pastries outside in the corner. Return at 11:30. Registration on the table outside on the left for those of you who haven't registered yet. And dissemination of projects is also on the same table. So please feel free to have a look. And I'll see you all in 35 minutes or so. Thank you very much.